Thank you guys so much for being here. It was March 12th, 2020, the last day of normal before life shut down. We had just spent the week at Disneyland with my dad and stepmom, and as we sat down for one last meal together, my not quite 2-year-old toddled over to us, set down his sippy cup, and declared, "All done." My stepmom looked at me surprised and said, "I think that's the first thing I've heard him say all week." She was right, come to think of it. Koimburi, our second born, had hit most milestones on the later side, but he had spoken pretty early, saying mama at just 5 months. I have witnesses. He acquired new words slowly though, and only had about a dozen. Ball, ditter for his 5-year-old sister, Google for our smart speaker, of course, before he slowly started losing them. And just shy of his second birthday, my stepmom's comment hung in the air as we realized, wow, he really doesn't talk anymore, not even to babble. I didn't know it yet, but that simple moment will mark the beginning of a completely new chapter in our lives. We called the pediatrician who set up speech therapy and recommended a developmental assessment. As type B parents who had not read a single parenting book, we had no clue what they would even be assessing for. At night, I would sit and Google, "my son doesn't talk," and result after result listed the same word, autism. The word made my heart sink. I didn't know anything about autism, only that I should fear it. After all, fear is what causes people to spread conspiracy theories about vaccines, right? I pictured a life where my son would be ostracized and unable to connect with others, do well at school, or have a fulfilling life. At the assessment that July, I had no clue what to expect, and thanks to COVID restrictions, I was alone. The doctor asked me countless questions, then got down on the floor to play with my son. With each activity, she'd highlight all the ways he was playing wrong. When he carefully straightened a crooked block on a tower, she noted it as a red flag. I understood what she was trying to show me, but I couldn't help thinking, wow, it's a bad thing that my son is organized? After an hour of playing, she tallied all her notes and gave the diagnosis, autism. She pointed out his delayed motor skills, flapping his hands, spinning, limited eye contact, rigid ways of playing, like the tower, and of course his lack of speech. "But don't worry," she added. "When we diagnose this early, there's always a chance of reversing it. If he does a lot of therapy and makes a lot of progress, before he turns 5, the diagnosis can go away." I tried to cling to the hope of those final words, but the diagnosis knocked the wind out of me. I felt completely unprepared and utterly alone. I sobbed the entire drive home, listening to this Christian song on repeat and singing the words over and over and over, singing to God, "You are a way maker, a miracle worker, a promise keeper, light in the darkness." I sobbed and prayed for a miracle. Prayed that God would make a way for all of this to go away, for everything to go back to normal. If we worked really hard, maybe my son could be like every other kid, and we could be like every other family. The next few months were lonely. The world was shut down, so there were no support groups or play dates to attend, and only virtual therapies, which, as you can imagine, are completely unproductive for a toddler. The only access I had to community was online. Now, there are basically 2 sides of the internet when it comes to autism. One that paints autism as the enemy, and one that embraces it as part of human diversity. One side is full of heavy, heartbreaking narratives from parents at their breaking point. I would never diminish their struggles because my family faces them too. The agony of your child not being able to communicate what's wrong, meltdowns that can turn violent, endless advocating, and safety concerns every moment of the day. But I am forever grateful that in my late night scrolling, I somehow found the other side, a community of autistic adults, many raising autistic kids of their own, sharing honest but hopeful truths. They shared what they wished their parents had known, and they taught me that my baby was never broken. He's just trying to get by in a world that wasn't built with him in mind. They showed me that he would never grow into his full true self if I became fixated on him catching up to his peers or suppressing what makes him unique. Instead, I would have to learn to follow his lead, to not try to reverse his autism, but to embrace it. This online community changed everything. It was like being handed a pair of glasses that helped me to see my son for who he truly is in all of his beauty, instead of measuring him up against the world's definition of normal. It was the single greatest gift on our autism journey, but still the painful parts remained. This was the summer of 2020 after all. In the midst of COVID lockdown, the murder of George Floyd weighed heavily on the hearts of the Black community. My husband and my 3 babies are Black, and the grief and fear during that time touched every corner of our lives. Just 2 weeks before Koimburi's diagnosis, footage was released of the murder of a Black teen named Elijah McClain. The police had targeted Elijah simply because he was flapping his arms as he walked along the road in his neighborhood. His last words before he died were, "I was just going home. I'm an introvert. I'm just different. That's all. I'm so sorry. I have no gun. I don't do that stuff. I don't do any fighting. Why are you attacking me?" Much of the Black autistic community saw themselves in Elijah McClain, and I couldn't separate this tragedy from my emotions around Koimburi's diagnosis. Like Elijah, Koimburi was both Black and different. Would he be seen as a threat just for being himself? And in addition to those big fears, there were all of the smaller ones, like, how could I ever send him to school if he can't tell me about his day? And how would we ever connect? Koimburi would spend hours playing on his own, seeming to need no input at all from me or anyone else. I longed to feel needed, and I dreamed of watching my 2 kids play together like I'd always imagined. But most of all, I was desperate to know what was on his mind. What food was he craving? Where might he like to go on an outing? It broke my heart to think that he may be daydreaming of a park we've driven by before, with no way to tell me about it. But still, there were beautiful, joyful glimmers in the midst of all the worries. I found moments of connection in his little arms wrapped tightly around my neck, erasing the need to hear a spoken "I love you." We celebrated moments that would seem ordinary to another family, but were earth-shattering in ours. The first time he playfully fed me a French fry, or the moment he brought me a red car and took me by the hand, inviting me to play with him for the very first time. I'm tempted to call this celebrating the small things, but it doesn't actually feel like that at all. It's more like this journey has given us a magnifying glass, helping us to see how big and beautiful those moments really are. But the biggest shift came when Koimburi got a communication device, an iPad with an app with hundreds of icons that let him say almost anything. It was a steep learning curve at first, but once he realized he could ask for Oreos and French fries and ice cream on it, his motivation started to grow. He began using it daily to request his favorite foods and even to say mom and dad when he was missing us. But I will never forget that spring day when his kindergarten teacher told us, Koimburi typed video. Not just pressing an icon, he typed. Spelling, our sweet boy could spell. It's been 1.5 years since then, and Koimburi's communication keeps blossoming. He types all the places he wants to go now. McDonald's, the car wash, the Natural History Museum, every single specific ride at Disneyland. He's also found a new amazing way to engage with the world through Google Maps. He navigates neighborhoods with an accuracy that astounds me, zooming in to choose which playgrounds he wants to check out next, and then pointing to our calendar on the fridge to make sure we schedule a day together. Years ago, I had prayed that maybe one day he'd be able to tell me where he'd like to go or which park he'd like to visit. And at just 7 years old, we're already living in that one day, a miracle that I never could have predicted. But I'm hesitant to make this story about his progress because in the world of autism, it feels like we're often asked to view our kids as projects. With most kids, once you get out of the toddler stage, you kind of stop checking in on milestones. You're more focused on watching who they're becoming, what they're interested in. But when your kid is disabled, it feels like the questions of, has he done this yet or that yet, never stop coming, as if making progress is the marker of who he is as a person. And don't get me wrong, every single step of progress, especially when it comes to communication, is huge. I just don't want his life reduced to that. He deserves to be seen for all of who he is. Deep in my heart, I know that even if he never made another inch of progress, his life would be just as full of significance and joy and dignity. I just wish other people saw it that way too. My heart hurts when I think of how assumptions and stereotypes prevent people from fully seeing my child. But at the same time, I'm in awe that I'm the one who gets to see him fully. The one who has the privilege of witnessing his magic up close every day. I get to watch him experience joy with his whole body, jumping and squealing and flapping his hands. I get to see him immerse himself in nature with all 5 senses, closing his eyes with delight as the breeze flows through his curly hair. I get to take him to the store each week when he says, "Eat fish," in his device, and then carefully chooses a whole trout, head and all, from the seafood counter. I get to follow his gaze as he points up at every airplane and helicopter, his eyes sparkling with wonder. And at the end of the day, I get to soak in a million kisses and cuddles. And now I get to watch him as a big brother. Our youngest, Ezekiel, is 2.5 and is the most hilarious, adorable, and chaotic human in existence. My mom is here, she can testify. When I was pregnant with him, our daughter asked if he'd be autistic too. She asked with pure curiosity, not wanting to be the odd one out if both her siblings shared the same identity. But I know some of our loved ones had that same question too, laced with fear. And I get it. From the outside, the challenges are probably more obvious than the joys. But we felt confident and equipped, knowing that if our baby boy was autistic, spoiler alert, he is, he'd have a big brother who would understand him better than anyone else could, a big sister who would love him unconditionally, and parents who had already mostly shed the weight of the world's expectations. The world wants my sons to stay still, do what they're told, and most of all, to become productive members of society. And some days I feel the eyes watching us and the pressure to raise kids who excel academically and achieve academic traditional success like my husband and I did. But then I look at Koimburi again. I see his joy, his gifts, and all the ways he's helped me to see life differently. And looking into his eyes, I picture a future where, yeah, maybe he won't ever live independently and we'll be roomies for life, who knows? Either way, I honestly don't feel any grief in that. Our life as a family is going to unfold exactly how it's supposed to, even if it looks totally different than I ever would have pictured. I think back to that fear when I first read about autism on Google. There's so much focus on what causes it, this desperate desire to find something to blame. And I think it's in our nature to do that with things that scare us. If we can blame something, then we can avoid it, right? We can trick ourselves into believing we're in control and that we can protect ourselves from difficulty. It's natural to want to avoid pain. When I prayed and cried and sang my heart out to God on that diagnosis day, asking God for a miracle, I desperately wanted him to make the hard thing disappear. But God had a different miracle in mind. Instead of changing my son, he changed my heart. He showed me that we can't just wish away the parts of our loved ones that are hard to understand. Love means embracing the messy right alongside the beautiful. And the same goes for autism. Autism is a natural genetic difference in the way some of us are wired, and it comes with some really cool gifts and also really hard challenges. But his uniqueness isn't a problem to fix. It's a package deal where the difficult sits right beside the breathtaking. We don't take our son's diagnoses or the challenges that come with them lightly, but we've come to see that like any meaningful journey, it's marked by both joy and struggle. And that's not something to fear, that's just real life. I'm so glad that God didn't give me what I thought I wanted that day. Instead of the normal life I once craved, God gave me something extraordinary. The one-of-a-kind story that he had written for us before my babies were even born. And today, if he handed me the pen, I wouldn't change a single word.